Thank you, Chairwoman. I certainly appreciate it. Now, I'm glad the majority chose the topic of illegal immigration for our first substantial hearing. The American people deserve to know what's going on at our border. The focus is child separation policy during the Trump administration and how we need to learn our lesson. Great, let's find out where this policy comes from because we haven't gone far enough back in history, and I always like a good history lesson. The policy of separating children can be traced back to the Clinton administration's settlement of Reno versus Flores. This court case dealt with INS's detention and release of unaccompanied minors. The court ruled in favor of INS separation policies, yet the Clinton administration decided to settle the litigation. According to Homeland Security, this settlement allowed the agency to detain unaccompanied minors for only 20 days before releasing them to the Department of Health and Human Services, which places the minors in foster or shelter situations until they locate a sponsor. The problem was worsened in 2016 under Loretta Lynch as AG, when the liberal Ninth Circuit interpreted the settlement to include minors unaccompanied and accompanied by their parents. Here we have the separation. Folks, now the floodgates were open to separate these children from their parents, and Trump hadn't even taken office. Not to mention the loophole that's already in place of catch and release, where we give these folks a court date and there's nothing forcing them to show up. A loophole that was codified in the Refugee Act of 1980, put together by a government entirely controlled by Democrats. Because of this, Trump instituted a zero tolerance policy to ensure we didn't just catch and release these people just to be lost in the interior of our country. Attorney General Sessions said that the zero tolerance policy would be used as a deterrent for potential smugglers and illegal immigrants. Wouldn't you agree? I've actually visited with parents in Guatemala and El Salvador, where cartel members have actually confiscated their children, and the parents were forced to follow. Following this policy change, family separation became a targeted attack. So if you want to ask me what I've learned from the Trump's policy of separating children, I've learned that it didn't start with him, and that the major immigration reform is needed to fix these underlying problems. When you don't fix something like catch and release, you hurt everyday Americans. I don't need to go over the same platitudes of why illegal immigration hurts American workers, because we all know them. Not only are American workers affected, but the people brought over are experiencing incredible hardships. There are countless examples, reports, and testimonies of people that have been trafficked over the border for illicit drug or sexual purposes, making the policy horrifying and, frankly, dehumanizing. In addition, we're seeing folks being recycled through the process. Thanks to our mainstream media, if you have a kid by your side of the border, you can't be separated with your adult companion, and you must be free to seek refuge with that same individual. DNA testing at the border has raised the scrutiny for being inaccurate or at best inconclusive. But why is it wrong for us to know if these people are even related? Don't we owe it to the children to make sure that that's the process? If the tests are supposedly inaccurate, we obviously agree on the premise of finding familial ties. So let's make it a priority to improve that testing. The Biden administration has announced that children will no longer be separated from their parents at the border. At the end of the day, this is window dressing that will be lapped up by the adoring media. What are his plans to deal with families crossing the border now? Will they be detained together? If released, what will it compel them to show up to their court hearings? Will we increase testing for the DNA at the border? What about COVID? Will these individuals even be tested at the border? No offense, Mr. Horowitz, we love seeing you. But you're not the individual who needs to be answering these questions if we truly have this emergency. That's why I urge it, why I bring it to the chairwoman. Madam Chairwoman, I challenge you to bring folks from the Biden administration before this committee to answer questions we would all like to know, because simply halting the separation of children at the border is the equivalent of putting a Band-Aid on a bullet wound. And with that, I yield back.